Hello, Man in Gray here with another Man in Gray book review. Today's book is Poirot Investigates by Agatha Christie. Originally published in 1924, this reprint from 2021, it's 225 pages. Agatha Christie was a British crime writer who was born in 1890 and died in 1976. She's considered, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, as the most popular fiction writer in world history. It's estimated that her books have sold some 2 billion copies. She's also the most translated author of all time. Her books have been translated into over 100 different languages. She's best known for her two series of mystery novels, one starring the fussy Belgian detective Hercule Poirot, and the other starring a amateur detective and little old lady, Jane Marple. But Agatha Christie was also a prolific writer of short stories. She published 14 collections of short stories during her career. And this book, Poirot Investigates, is the first collection of Poirot stories, all narrated by Poirot's faithful but dim-witted sidekick, Captain Hastings. And so all these stories are from the early part of Christie's career in the early 1920s. I should also mention that Christie also wrote the longest-running play in history, a play called The Mousetrap, which has been running on a London stage since 1952, a record that I doubt anyone will ever break. So let me quickly run through what some of these stories are about, give you a little capsule summary of these stories. And so if you haven't read, I should say at the beginning, if you haven't read Agatha Christie's at all, reading the short stories is probably a good place to start before you tackle the novels. Christie's novels are noted for their fantastically convoluted plots. She was not a great creator of characters or atmosphere, but she was a master at devising really intricate puzzle-like plots with a whole bunch of red herrings and dead ends, and then the whole thing somehow comes together at the end. And if you're new to Christie and you tackle one of her novels like Murder on the Orient Express or The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, you may be kind of lost as you wade through all the different plot twists. The stories are much more compressed, of course, because they're short stories, and they do have plot twists, but they're not nearly as convoluted or complicated as the novels. So if you're new to Christie, you might want to start with the short stories before you tackle the novels. I mean, they're still very entertaining. You still get a really good sense of Poirot's kind of OCD character. Anyway, The Adventure of the Western Star is the first story in the collection, and it involves a diamond heist, which Poirot foils at the last minute, and there's a little plot twist about who actually stole the diamond. The $1 Million Bond Robbery is a locked room mystery that takes place upon an ocean liner. $1 million in government bonds are being sent to New York, and then midway through the voyage, the bonds are stolen, and a massive search is put on to try to find the bonds, but they don't turn up anywhere. Nobody has them. They're not found anywhere on the ship. But as soon as the ship gets to New York, the bonds suddenly reappear, and whoever stole them is going around selling them in New York. And so Poirot has to figure out who stole the bonds, who the thief is, and how did they get them on and off the ship without being detected. The Adventure of the Cheap Flat is sort of a variation on a famous Sherlock Holmes story, The Red-Haired League. In this case, there's a apartment in a really nice part of town that's being rented for an extremely low rate, but it turns out only to someone whose name is Robinson. So Poirot realizes there's something fishy going on about that. The Mystery of the Hunter's Lodge is a story in which Poirot has to solve the mystery by remote control, basically. He's sick with the flu, and he's bedridden, and there's a murder that takes place out in the countryside at a hunting lodge, and so he sends his faithful but dim-witted companion, Captain Hastings, to investigate. And in a way, this is similar to the Hound of the Baskervilles, where for much of that novel, Dr. Watson is the investigator because Holmes is supposedly back in London. Well, in this case, Captain Hastings investigates the murder of this guy in a hunting lodge, but it's Poirot who figures out the truth when he's back in his bed in London. The Kidnapped Prime Minister is a story that takes place during World War One, and it's about there's a peace conference that's about to be held, and at the last minute, German spies kidnap the prime minister. And the problem is, where is he? He was apparently kidnapped in France, but he could be in England. There's nobody knows where, and so Poirot has to race against time. He has to find the prime minister and capture the spies before the peace conference, and he has less than 24 hours to do it. So it's kind of a race against time mystery there. The Adventure of the Egyptian Tomb is a story that was inspired by the then recent discovery of King Tut's tomb by Howard Carter. Also, Agatha Christie's second husband was an archaeologist who spent extensive time in Egypt, and so she takes in a lot of the local color of Egypt there because she had traveled there with him. In this story, three Egyptologists die under mysterious circumstances. Is it a coincidence? Or are they the victim of a mummy's curse? Or could there be a more sinister plot to kill off these people? And if so, why? The Adventure of the Italian Nobleman is another locked room story in which an Italian nobleman is shot in a room, and there doesn't appear to be anybody coming in or out. And so Poirot has to figure out what happened there. The jewel robbery at the Grand Metro Hotel. Okay, the Grand Metro. This is a story in which takes place outside of London. Poirot and Hastings decide to go on a weekend holiday out to the seaside town of Brighton, which was a big tourist trap back in the 1920s. And while they're at the hotel, they stumble on the robbery of a pearl necklace. This is another locked room mystery. Christie was really good at those, in which a necklace seemingly disappears out of nowhere in a locked hotel room. And there's two suspects, both servants of the woman who owned the necklace. So which one did it, if either one? And then the disappearance of Mr. Daverheim is a story about a banker who suddenly walks out of his mansion and disappears into thin air. And then shortly after there, it's discovered that someone has broken into a safe and cleaned out all the money and the valuables and the stocks and everything. And so the question is, was Davidson killed? Was he kidnapped? Did he run away on purpose? Where is he? Where's his body? And so forth. And the plot is full of interesting little twits, implausible as they may be. And the collection ends with the case of the missing will, which is a story that ends on a lighter note because no one dies and there's actually not even a crime committed. There's a young woman who's an orphan, and her rich uncle dies, and he leaves two wills. He was upset with her because she insisted on getting an education. He was an old-fashioned guy who believed that women should stay home and have babies, much like some people today. Anyway, he writes two wills. One of the wills, he leaves everything to a hospital and cuts his niece out entirely. The other will, he leaves her everything, but the trick is he hides the will in which he leaves her everything somewhere in his mansion. And he's basically saying, well, if you're so smart, if you're so educated, he didn't think women were really smart enough to be worth going to school and being educated, which was not an unusual idea in late Victorian times. One of Gilbert and Sullivan's operettas is actually about that topic, about how stupid it is to educate women. What a waste of money and time that is. Anyway, he's basically challenging his niece. He said, if you're so smart, you've got 1 year to find the missing will, or else everything goes to the hospital. And so she knows that Poirot is the guy to go to. So she goes to him and brings the case to him, and he tries to figure out where the will is. And again, there's this little plot twist at the end, which you don't see coming. So that's kind of a rundown of the stories in here. They're all very entertaining. There is a little warning I need to give you. These stories were written 100 years ago. And in some of the stories, Christie uses racial stereotypes and especially racial terms for people of color, which today would be totally unacceptable. Basically racist, stereotypical terms for Asian people and others. Italians don't come off very well in this either. And so, if that's something that really, really bothers you, you might not want to read this, or you might want to skip those stories. They're not all like that. Not all of them have racial stereotypes, but some of them do. The stories haven't been changed at all. They haven't been censored or altered in any way. So, you're going to run into some of those terms, especially in the first few stories. So be aware of that. So, as I said before, this is a really entertaining collection of stories, not nearly as complicated as the novels, but it gives you a flavor of Christie and her marvelous ability to spin these complicated plots that leave you guessing. They're not like the modern mystery stories in which the reader is given the clues, and if you're smart enough, you can figure out the killer or the mystery at the end. I think Ellery Queen's stories were the first to kind of promote that idea. You're not going to be able to figure out the villains, the killers, or the thieves, or whatever in these, because Christie hides the information from you until the very end, when Poirot just delivers the solution to you. So in that way, they're kind of a link back to the older style of mystery stories that Arthur Conan Doyle wrote, and Edgar Allan Poe, and people of that era. They're not stories that you can figure out on your own. So if you're one of these people that reads mysteries to try to figure out the puzzle, you're going to be disappointed in these, because you're not going to be able to do that, because they're not written that way. But if you love the Poirot character, if you've seen him on movies or in TV shows, you'll really enjoy, I think, this collection of stories. The book is Poirot Investigates. The author is Agatha Christie. This has been another Man in Gray book review. Thanks for watching.